The blood on Zachariah Jameson's hands had dried 3 days ago, but he could still feel the weight of what he had done pressing against his chest like a stone. He rode into McGill, Nevada, with nothing but a worn saddlebag, a horse that had seen better days, and a guilt that followed him like his own shadow across the dust-streaked afternoon of July 1882. McGill was a copper mining town, small enough that strangers were noticed, but large enough that they could disappear if they wanted to. Zachariah wanted exactly that. The main street stretched before him with its wooden storefronts and hitching posts, miners coming off their shifts with copper dust in their hair and exhaustion in their eyes. He guided his horse toward what looked like a boarding house, its painted sign promising clean rooms and hot meals. That was when he saw her through the window of the general store. A woman stood before a large mirror propped against the wall, her lips moving as though in conversation. Her dark hair was pinned up in a simple style, and she wore a practical calico dress the color of faded roses. What struck him was not her beauty, though she was lovely in an understated way, but the profound sadness in her posture as she spoke to her own reflection. Zachariah dismounted and tied his horse, telling himself he needed supplies anyway. The bell above the door chimed as he entered, and the woman turned sharply, her cheeks flushing pink. She was younger than he had first thought, perhaps 23 or 24, with green eyes that held both wariness and something like loneliness. "I will be right with you," she said, her voice steady despite her obvious embarrassment. She moved behind the counter with practiced efficiency, smoothing her apron. "What can I help you find?" "Just need some basic supplies," Zachariah said, removing his hat. Dust fell from the brim. "Coffee, hardtack, maybe some dried beef if you have it. We have all of that." She began gathering items, her movements quick and precise. "You are new in town. Just arrived. Name is Zachariah Jameson. Fiona Jennings. I run this store with my father, though he is resting upstairs today. His health is not what it used to be." She wrapped the supplies in brown paper with neat, efficient movements. "Will you be staying in McGill long?" "Do not know yet." That was the truth. He had no plans beyond putting distance between himself and the man he had killed in self-defense 2 weeks ago in a saloon in Virginia City. The law had cleared him, but the dead man's brothers had not. Fiona tallied his purchases, and when their fingers brushed as he handed her the coins, she pulled back as though burned. "I apologize," she said quickly. "I do not mean to be rude. I just do not have much occasion to speak with people outside of transactions." "You were talking to someone a moment ago," Zachariah said, then immediately regretted it when her face went scarlet. "That is different. That is just me being foolish." She placed his supplies in a canvas bag. "My father says I spend too much time alone, but he needs me here, and there is not much else for me in this town." "You were saying something about needing a friend who listens." Fiona's eyes widened, and for a moment she looked as though she might deny it. Instead, she let out a small, sad laugh. "You heard that? How mortifying. Yes, I suppose I do. Sometimes I need a friend who listens, and my reflection never interrupts or judges. It just listens, which is more than I can say for most people." She straightened her shoulders. "But that is hardly your concern, Mr. Jameson." "Will there be anything else?" "No, madam. Thank you kindly." As he left the store, Zachariah found himself thinking about the loneliness in her eyes. He recognized it because he carried the same weight. He had been running for so long, first from the poverty of his childhood, then from the violence that seemed to follow men in the West like a curse. He had worked cattle drives, served as a deputy for a brief time, and tried his hand at mining. None of it had given him peace. He found a room at the boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson, who asked few questions and served generous portions at dinner. That evening, as he sat on the porch watching the sun set behind the Egan Range, he thought again of Fiona Jennings talking to her reflection. The next morning, Zachariah went back to the general store. He told himself it was because he had forgotten to buy tobacco, but the truth sat heavier than that. The store was empty when he entered except for Fiona, who was restocking shelves with canned goods. "Mr. Jameson," she said, surprised. "Did we forget something yesterday? I need some tobacco, and I was wondering if you might need any help around here. I am looking for work and I am good with repairs, heavy lifting, that sort of thing." Fiona studied him carefully, as though trying to discern his real motives. "Why would a man like you want to work in a general store? The mines pay better." "I have done enough work underground, figured I would try something that let me see the sky." That was partly true. Mostly, he wanted to understand why this woman had captured his attention so completely. "My father might appreciate the help. The stairs have become difficult for him, and there are some repairs needed out back." She bit her lower lip. "Can you come back this afternoon? He will want to meet you before we hire anyone." "I will be here." Fiona's father, Thomas Jennings, was a thin man with kind eyes and a persistent cough that spoke of lung problems, probably from years of mining before he opened the store. He shook Zachariah's hand firmly and asked pointed questions about his experience and his reasons for being in McGill. "I am not running from the law, if that is what you are asking," Zachariah said, "but I am running from some trouble that was not of my making. I defended myself against a man who drew on me first. His brothers did not see it that way." Thomas exchanged a glance with Fiona. "I appreciate your honesty. We have all got pasts out here. Question is whether a man is trying to be better or worse than he was. Which are you?" "Better, sir. Every day if I can manage it." "Then you are hired. I can pay you room and board plus a small wage." "It is not much, but it is honest work." Zachariah started that very afternoon, moving heavy crates and fixing a broken shelf that had been sagging for months. Fiona worked alongside him, and he noticed how she would sometimes start to say something, then stop herself, as though she had forgotten how to make conversation beyond the transactional. On the third day, as they were closing up the store, Zachariah said, "Tell me about yourself, Miss Jennings. How did you end up in McGill?" She was sweeping the floor and paused mid-stroke. "That is a sad story, Mr. Jameson. Are you certain you want to hear it?" "I would not have asked otherwise." Fiona leaned the broom against the counter and sat on the stool behind it. "My mother died when I was 16. Fever took her quickly. My father could not bear to stay in the house where she had died, so we moved here from Austin, Nevada. He thought a fresh start would help, but grief does not care about geography. He threw himself into building this business, and I threw myself into helping him. Years passed, and I realized one day that I had no friends, no life beyond these walls. The young people in town have their own circles, and I do not fit into them anymore. I missed my chance somehow." "You are young still," Zachariah said. "Too young to talk like your life is over." "I am 24. Most women my age are married with children. Instead, I talk to mirrors and pretend it counts as companionship." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "What about you? What is your sad story?" Zachariah told her then, more than he had told anyone. He spoke of growing up poor in Missouri, of heading west at 18 to make his fortune, of all the ways he had failed and tried again. He told her about the man he had killed, about the sick feeling in his stomach when the body hit the floor, about the dead man's brothers swearing vengeance. "So I keep moving," he finished. "Figured maybe I could stop here for a while, catch my breath. Until they find you. Until I figure out what kind of man I want to be when this is all over." Fiona reached across the counter and, with visible effort, placed her hand over his. "You seem like a good man to me, Zachariah. I think you have been one all along, just dealt some hard circumstances." The warmth of her hand sent something like electricity through him. When was the last time someone had touched him with kindness? "Thank you, Fiona. That means more than you know." They fell into an easy rhythm over the following weeks. Zachariah proved invaluable around the store, and Thomas's health improved slightly when the burden of physical labor was lifted from him. More importantly, Fiona began to open up like a flower that had been waiting for the right season. She told Zachariah about the books she loved to read, adventure stories and romances that took her far from McGill. He told her about the places he had seen, the mountains and plains, the way the stars looked from a cattle drive when you were so far from civilization that the sky seemed to press down on you with all its vastness. One evening in late August, after the store had closed, they sat on the back steps and watched the sunset paint the desert in shades of orange and purple. Fiona was quieter than usual, and Zachariah could sense something weighing on her mind. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "I was thinking about how strange it is that you came here, how you walked into my store on the exact day I was at my loneliest, talking to my reflection because I had no one else." She turned to look at him, and in the fading light her eyes were luminous. "You believe in fate, Zachariah?" "I do not know, never gave it much thought. I think maybe I do. I think maybe you were meant to find me that day." His heart was beating too fast. "Fiona, I am a man with trouble following him. Getting close to me might not be wise. Perhaps that is my choice to make." She stood, brushing off her skirt. "I have played it safe my whole life, staying in this store, talking to mirrors. Maybe it is time I took a risk on something real." Before Zachariah could respond, she went inside, leaving him with the distinct feeling that something fundamental had shifted between them. The next day was Sunday, and the store was closed. Zachariah had developed a habit of using his day off to explore the area around McGill, partly to familiarize himself with escape routes if the need arose, partly because he had come to appreciate the harsh beauty of the Nevada landscape. This Sunday, Fiona surprised him by asking if she could come along. "Father is feeling well today, and I think the fresh air would do me good. I have not left town in months." They rode out together, Fiona on a gentle mare from the livery stable, heading toward the low hills east of town. She was not an experienced rider, but she had determination, and Zachariah found himself admiring the set of her shoulders, the way she refused to complain even when the horse acted skittish. They stopped near a stand of Joshua trees, strange twisted things that seemed to belong to another world entirely. Zachariah helped Fiona down from her horse, and when his hands circled her waist, they both froze. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. "Zachariah," she said softly, not moving away from him. "I know you said getting close to you might not be wise, but I have to tell you that I do not care. These past weeks with you have been the happiest I have had in years. You listen to me. You see me. That is all I have ever wanted. Fiona, if something were to happen to you because of me, I could not live with myself. And if I let fear keep me from living, what kind of life is that?" She reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "I am tired of being afraid. I am tired of being alone." He kissed her then, unable to resist any longer. Her lips were soft and tentative at first, then grew bolder as she leaned into him. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "I have never," Fiona said, then stopped, her cheeks flushed. "That was my first kiss." "Then I am honored it was with me." Zachariah took her hand. "But we need to be honest about what this means. Those men who are after me, they will not stop looking. Eventually they might come here. Then we will face that when it happens, together." They spent the rest of the day talking and laughing, and Zachariah felt something he had not experienced in years. Hope. Hope that he might have a future beyond running, beyond violence. Hope that he might build something real with this remarkable woman, who had been brave enough to risk her heart on a wanted man. The weeks that followed were the best of Zachariah's life. He and Fiona stole moments together whenever they could. Quick kisses in the storeroom, long conversations after closing time, walks through town in the evening when the desert heat had finally broken. Thomas noticed, of course, but he said nothing, only watched them with a knowing smile. It was in late September when everything changed. Zachariah was in the back of the store, unpacking a shipment of dry goods when three men walked in. He heard their spurs before he saw them, that distinctive jingle that marked them as riders, and something in the sound made his blood run cold. He moved to the doorway where he could see without being seen. Three hard-looking men stood at the counter, and Fiona was facing them with practiced courtesy, though Zachariah could see the tension in her shoulders. "We are looking for a man," the tallest of them said. He had a cruel face and a voice like gravel. "Name of Zachariah Jameson. Heard he might have passed through here." "We get many travelers," Fiona said carefully. "I cannot recall every name. This one you would remember. Tall fellow, dark hair, probably nervous acting. Killed our brother up in Virginia City." Zachariah's hand moved to the pistol at his hip. He had hoped for more time, but hope was a luxury in the West. "I am sorry for your loss," Fiona said, "but I truly cannot help you." The man leaned across the counter, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "I think you are lying, miss. I think maybe you have seen him." That was when Zachariah stepped out of the back room, his hand away from his gun but ready to move. "No need to trouble the lady. I am the man you are looking for." All three men turned, their hands moving to their weapons. Zachariah kept his own hands visible, his voice calm. "But before you do something we will all regret, you should know that the marshal in Virginia City cleared me. Your brother drew first. There were witnesses." "We do not care about what some bought marshal says," the tall man spat. "You killed our blood, that debt gets paid. Then let's take this outside. No need to involve innocent people." "Zachariah, no," Fiona said, moving around the counter, but he stopped her with a look. "Trust me. Go upstairs to your father." For a moment he thought she would refuse, but then she nodded and disappeared through the back door. The three men followed Zachariah out onto the street, and he was gratefully aware that the afternoon was quiet, most people inside escaping the heat. They faced each other in the dusty street, and Zachariah felt oddly calm. He had faced death before and survived. He would do it again if it meant keeping Fiona safe. "I am going to give you one chance," Zachariah said. "Ride away. Your brother made a choice and he paid for it. Do not make the same mistake." "Big talk for a man facing 3 guns," one of the other men said. 3 guns held by men who have never been in a real fight. "I can see it in the way you stand, the way your hands shake. You are angry and hurting, but you are not killers. Not yet. Walk away before you become something you cannot take back." The tall man's face twisted with rage, and Zachariah knew then that words would not work. His hand moved with the speed of long practice, drawing and firing before any of them could react. His bullet took the tall man in the shoulder, spinning him around. The other 2 froze, their guns halfway out. "Next shot goes center mass," Zachariah said, his voice hard. "Drop them." They dropped their guns. The tall man was on his knees, clutching his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. "You shot me," he said, stunned. "I could have killed you. I chose not to. Take that as a gift and get out of my town." By now, people had emerged from buildings, drawn by the gunshot. The town marshal, a weathered man named Davis, pushed through the crowd. "What happened here?" These men came looking for revenge over a justified shooting in Virginia City, Zachariah said, lowering his gun but not holstering it. I gave them a chance to leave. They chose poorly. Marshal Davis looked at the three men, then at Zachariah. That true, the tall man, still gripping his shoulder, nodded reluctantly. Davis sighed. I will get Doc Bennett to look at that shoulder, then you three are leaving town. And if I hear you have been bothering Mr. Jameson again, I will wire every marshal between here and California. Understood. They understood. An hour later, the three men rode out of McGill, the tall one pale but patched up, all of them considerably chastened. Zachariah watched them go from the porch of the general store, Fiona beside him. You could have killed him, she said quietly. I have killed enough men, did not need to add another if I could avoid it. He turned to her, taking her hands. But this proves my point, Fiona. That kind of violence follows me. Maybe you should reconsider what you are getting into. She pulled her hands free, but only so she could wrap her arms around him. You defended yourself. You showed mercy when you did not have to. That tells me exactly what kind of man you are, Zachariah Jameson. And it makes me want to be with you even more. He held her close, breathing in the scent of lavender from her hair, and allowed himself to believe, for the first time, that he might actually have a future worth living. That evening, Thomas called them both upstairs to the apartment above the store. He looked frailer than usual, his breathing labored, but his eyes were sharp and kind. Sit down, both of you, he said. They sat on the worn sofa while Thomas settled into his chair. I am not blind and I am not stupid. I see what is between you two. Father, I can explain, Fiona began, but Thomas held up a hand. No need. I approve if that matters. He looked at Zachariah. You are a good man who has seen hard times. You have been honest with us, worked hard, and most importantly, you have made my daughter happy again. I had begun to worry she would spend her whole life in this store, alone and sad. Sir, I care for Fiona deeply, more than I thought possible. I know you do. I also know your situation is complicated, but life in the West is always complicated. The question is whether you are brave enough to build something despite that. Thomas started coughing, deep, racking coughs that shook his thin frame. Fiona rushed to get him water, and when the fit passed, he looked exhausted. I am dying. The doctor says maybe 6 months, maybe less. Lung disease from my mining days. I have been trying to figure out what would happen to Fiona after I am gone, and now I think I know. Father, please do not talk like that, Fiona said, tears in her eyes. Hush, girl, we all die. I just want to make sure you are taken care of first. He looked at Zachariah. Marry her, take care of her in this store, build a life here. It is not much, but it is honest and good, and sometimes that is enough. Zachariah felt the weight of the moment pressing on him. He looked at Fiona, saw the hope and fear warring in her expression, and made his choice. I would be honored, sir, if Fiona will have me. Is that a proposal? Fiona asked, laughing through her tears. Zachariah got down on one knee, there in the small apartment above the general store, and took her hand. Fiona Jennings, I came to this town running from my past, and I found a future instead. You brought light into my darkness, friendship into my loneliness. I love you more than I thought I could love anything. Will you marry me? Yes, she said simply. Yes, yes, yes. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church at the edge of town. Fiona wore a dress that had been her mother's, altered to fit her smaller frame, and she carried wildflowers Zachariah had ridden out to pick that morning. Thomas walked her down the aisle, his steps slow but steady, pride evident on his face. The ceremony was simple but beautiful. When Zachariah kissed his bride, he tasted salt from her tears and felt his own eyes burning. They held a small reception at the boarding house, with Mrs. Patterson providing the food and half the town showing up to wish them well. Even Marshal Davis came, grinning and shaking Zachariah's hand. "You did good, son," Davis said. "That girl needed someone to bring her back to life." That night, in the small room they would share above the store, Fiona stood by the window looking out at the dark street. Zachariah came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "I am thinking that I used to talk to my reflection because I was lonely. Now I have you, and I will never be lonely again." She turned in his arms, her face glowing in the lamplight. "Thank you for finding me, Zachariah. Thank you for listening. Thank you for taking a chance on a man with a complicated past. Our past is what brought us here. I would not change it." She kissed him softly. "Now we get to build our future." The months that followed were bittersweet. Thomas's health declined steadily, and by January he was bedridden more often than not. Zachariah and Fiona ran the store together, and in the evenings they took turns sitting with Thomas, reading to him or simply keeping him company. In late February, on a cold, clear night, Thomas called them to his bedside. "I am ready," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I have made my peace. You two have given me the greatest gift, letting me see my daughter happy and loved before I go." "I love you, Father," Fiona said, holding his hand. "I love you too, my girl. Be happy. That is all I ever wanted for you." He looked at Zachariah. "Take care of her." "With my life, sir." Thomas Jennings died peacefully an hour later with his daughter and son-in-law beside him. They buried him in the small cemetery outside of town, next to a plot they had marked for Fiona's mother, bringing her memory close even though her body lay in Austin. The grief was hard, but they weathered it together. The store became theirs entirely, and they threw themselves into making it thrive. Zachariah proved to have a head for business, and Fiona's warmth with customers brought in steady trade. By spring, they were making a real profit, enough to make improvements and even save a little. One evening in April, as they were closing up, Fiona turned to Zachariah with an expression he could not quite read. "I need to tell you something," she said. His heart jumped. "What is it?" "Are you all right?" "More than all right. Zachariah, I am with child." The world seemed to stop. Then Zachariah let out a whoop of joy and swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to stop. "Are you sure?" he asked, setting her down gently. "As sure as I can be. I think I am about 2 months along." She placed his hand on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." "We are going to have a baby," he repeated, wonder in his voice. "Fiona, I never thought I would have this. A wife, a home, a child. I thought I would die alone somewhere, unmourned and unmissed. You are stuck with me now," she said, smiling. "You and this baby and whatever other babies come after. We are your family, Zachariah. Forever." The baby, a boy they named Thomas after Fiona's father, was born in November of 1883, with Mrs. Patterson attending as midwife. He had his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair. And from the moment Zachariah held him, he knew he would do anything to protect this small, perfect person. Fiona proved to be a natural mother, patient and loving, and Zachariah discovered depths of tenderness in himself he had not known existed. They took turns walking the floor with Thomas when he cried at night, and they marveled together over every small milestone, every smile and coo. The store continued to prosper. They hired a young man named Peter to help with the heavy work, giving them more time with their son. Life settled into a rhythm that felt almost miraculous to Zachariah, who had spent so much of his existence in chaos and motion. One afternoon in the summer of 1884, as Zachariah was restocking shelves while Fiona nursed Thomas in the back room, a familiar figure walked through the door. It took Zachariah a moment to recognize Marshal Davis from Virginia City, now looking considerably older and wearing the dust of a long journey. "Zachariah Jameson," Davis said, extending his hand. "Good to see you again. Marshall Davis, what brings you to McGill?" Zachariah shook his hand, wary but not afraid. "Wanted to deliver some news in person. Those brothers who came after you. The two younger ones have been arrested for armed robbery up in Elko. The older one, the one you wounded, he turned himself in to me last month. Said he wanted to confess to threatening you, wanted to clear his conscience." Davis smiled. "Seems your mercy made an impression. He is doing time for assault, but he told me to tell you that the debt is paid if I ever saw you. His words, not mine." Zachariah felt something loosen in his chest, a tension he had carried for so long he had forgotten it was there. "Thank you for coming all this way to tell me. Figured you deserved to know you could stop looking over your shoulder. You have built a good life here, Jameson. Do not let the past haunt it anymore." Davis tipped his hat and left, and Zachariah stood in the quiet store, feeling the full weight of his freedom for the first time. That night, he told Fiona about the marshal's visit. She cried with relief, and they held each other close, their son sleeping peacefully in his cradle nearby. "It is really over," she said. "We can just be happy now." "We can just be happy now," he agreed. The years flowed by like water. Thomas grew into a bright, curious boy who loved to help in the store, carefully stacking cans and greeting customers with his mother's warm smile. In 1886, Fiona gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Eleanor, who had her father's serious eyes and her mother's gentle nature. The store expanded into the building next door, and they hired more help to manage the increased business. Zachariah served briefly on the town council, working to bring better roads and a proper school to McGill. Fiona started a lending library in the store, her beloved books now available for others to discover. On a warm evening in June of 1889, Zachariah and Fiona sat on the porch of the home they had built behind the store, watching Thomas chase fireflies while Eleanor toddled after him on unsteady legs. Fiona leaned against Zachariah's shoulder, contentment radiating from her. "You remember the day we met?" she asked. "When you caught me talking to my reflection. I remember thinking you were the loneliest person I had ever seen, and that I understood exactly how that felt. I was so embarrassed, I thought you would think I was crazy. I thought you were brave, still do." He kissed the top of her head. "You took a chance on me when you had every reason not to. You gave me a life I did not think men like me got to have. Men like you deserve happiness just as much as anyone else. More, maybe, because you have seen the worst of the world and still chose to be good." She tilted her face up to look at him. "I love you, Zachariah, more every day. I love you too. You and these children are the best thing I ever did." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the children play, the desert sunset painting everything in shades of gold. Zachariah thought about the man he had been when he rode into McGill 7 years ago, desperate and haunted. That man seemed like a stranger now. In 1892, they welcomed their third child, another boy they named Samuel. The house expanded to accommodate their growing family, and the store became a cornerstone of the community, known for fair prices and friendly service. Thomas, now 9 years old, showed an aptitude for numbers that delighted his father. Eleanor, at 6, was already reading at a level far beyond her years, much to her mother's pride. And little Samuel was a cheerful baby who rarely cried, content to observe the world with wide, curious eyes. One spring morning, Zachariah found Fiona standing in front of the hall mirror, the same one from the store that they had moved to their home years ago. She was not talking to her reflection this time, just looking at it with a small smile. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, coming up behind her. I am thinking about the woman I see in this mirror now compared to the woman I was. She is so different, happier, loved. She turned to face him. I used to talk to my reflection because I had no one else. Now I have you, our children, a full life. I cannot even remember what that loneliness felt like anymore. Neither can I. He pulled her close. We saved each other, Fiona. That is what I think. You needed someone who would listen, and I needed someone who would see me as more than my past. We found each other at exactly the right moment. Sometimes I still think about fate, about how unlikely it was that you walked into my store that day. What if you had ridden right through town? What if you had never come inside? But I did come inside. And I saw you talking to your reflection, looking so sad and so brave at the same time. I knew in that moment that my life was about to change, even if I did not understand how yet. They stood together in front of the mirror, their reflections showing a couple in their 30s, healthy and content, with the sounds of children playing in the background. It was an ordinary moment, and that was what made it extraordinary. After years of running and loneliness, they had found the most precious thing of all. A simple, peaceful life filled with love. As the 1890s progressed, McGill continued to grow and the Jameson family grew with it. Zachariah's past faded into distant memory, something that had happened to a different person in a different life. He was known now as a respected businessman and devoted father, a man who could be counted on to help his neighbors and contribute to the community. Fiona blossomed into her role as wife and mother, but she never lost the independence that had first attracted Zachariah to her. She ran the lending library with passionate efficiency, introduced new products to the store based on customer needs, and became an advocate for education in the town. The lonely woman who had talked to her reflection was gone, replaced by someone confident and purposeful. In the summer of 1895, Thomas turned 12 and began working regularly in the store, learning the business from the ground up. Eleanor, now 9, showed an interest in teaching and often helped the younger children in town with their reading. Samuel, at 3, was a whirlwind of energy who kept everyone on their toes. One evening in August, after the children were in bed, Zachariah and Fiona sat on their porch swing, the desert air finally cooling after a scorching day. Fiona rested her head on his shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, marveling as he always did at how perfectly she fit against him. "Are you happy?" he asked. It was a question he asked sometimes, needing to hear her answer. "Deliriously," she said. "Are you?" "More than I ever imagined possible. Sometimes I wake up in the night and have to remind myself this is real, that I actually get to keep this life." "You get to keep it. We both do. We built it together and no one can take it from us." She laced her fingers through his. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if things had gone differently? If those men had killed you, or if you had never come to McGill?" "Sometimes. But mostly I try to focus on what did happen. The choices we made, the life we built. That is what matters." "You are right. The past is the past. What matters is now and all the nows we still have ahead of us." They rocked gently on the swing, the stars emerging one by one in the darkening sky. In the distance, a coyote howled, and somewhere closer, a horse nickered softly in the stable. These were the sounds of home, familiar and comforting. "I have been thinking," Fiona said after a while. "Maybe we should expand the store again. There is talk of more mining operations opening up, which means more people coming to town. We should be ready." "That is a good idea. Thomas is old enough now to take on more responsibility. It would be good experience for him. He reminds me of you sometimes. The way he thinks things through, the way he is always fair with the younger children. He has your kindness, though, and your smile. All three of them do." They continued to talk, making plans for the future, sharing memories of the past. simply enjoying each other's company the way they had for 13 years of marriage. The ease between them was the product of thousands of these moments, accumulated day by day into something solid and lasting. By the turn of the century, the Jameson family was a fixture in McGill. Their store was the largest in town, employing 6 people and stocking goods from San Francisco to Denver. Thomas, now 17, was being groomed to eventually take over the business. Eleanor, 14, had indeed become a teacher's assistant, helping at the schoolhouse every afternoon. Samuel, 8, was showing an interest in horses and spent every free moment at the livery stable. In 1900, Fiona discovered she was pregnant again, a surprise that delighted them both. Their 4th child, a daughter they named Grace, was born in the spring of 1901, when Fiona was 39 and Zachariah was 42. The older children doted on their baby sister, and the house rang with laughter and activity. One afternoon in the autumn of 1903, Zachariah came home to find Fiona standing in front of the hall mirror again. This time, though, she was not alone. Grace, now 2 years old, stood beside her, and they were both making faces at their reflections, giggling together. "Teaching her your old tricks?" Zachariah asked, smiling. Fiona looked up, still laughing. "I was just telling her how Mama used to talk to the mirror when she was lonely. She thinks it is very silly." "It is silly," Grace announced with the certainty of a toddler. "Maybe it was," Fiona said, picking up her daughter. "But the mirror was a good friend when I needed one. And then Daddy came along and made it so I did not need to talk to mirrors anymore." Zachariah crossed the room and put his arms around both of them. "Best thing I ever did was walk into that store and hear you saying you needed a friend who listens. Best thing I ever did was be brave enough to let you try." Grace squirmed to be put down, and they let her go, watching as she toddled off in search of her siblings. Zachariah and Fiona remained standing together in front of the mirror, looking at their reflections. "Look at us," Fiona said softly. "Gray in our hair, lines on our faces. When did we get old? We are not old. We are seasoned." Zachariah turned her to face him. "And you are just as beautiful as the day I met you. More so, because now I know the strength that lives inside you. Flatterer, truth-teller." He kissed her, slow and deep, the kiss of 2 people who had loved each other through years of joy and struggle and everything in between. In 1906, Thomas married a young woman named Catherine who had come to McGill from Salt Lake City. The wedding was a grand affair, the biggest celebration the town had seen in years. Zachariah walked his son through the store the night before the wedding, showing him the books, explaining the intricacies of the business. "Your mother and I built this together," he said. "But it is yours now, yours and Catherine's. Make it your own. Build your own dreams here." "I will make you proud, Father." "You already have, son. You already have." Eleanor left for Teachers College in 1907, eager to pursue her education so she could return and open a proper school in McGill. Samuel, now 15, had indeed become an expert horseman and was working with the ranches outside of town, breeding and training horses. As the years continued to pass, Zachariah and Fiona gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the store, leaving it in Thomas and Catherine's capable hands. They traveled for the first time, taking a train to San Francisco to see the ocean, marveling at the great expanse of water that seemed to go on forever. On the beach, with the waves crashing around their feet, Fiona turned to Zachariah with tears in her eyes. "I never thought I would see this. When I was that lonely girl talking to her reflection, I thought the store was all I would ever know. Look how far you have come, how far we have both come, because we found each other, because you were brave enough to step into that store and I was brave enough to let you in." They returned to McGill refreshed and renewed, ready for the next chapter of their lives. Alina came home with her teaching degree and opened a school that quickly became renowned throughout the region. Samuel married the daughter of a ranch owner and started his own breeding operation. Grace, growing into a spirited young woman, showed an interest in medicine and talked about becoming a nurse. In the summer of 1915, Zachariah and Fiona celebrated their 32nd wedding anniversary. Their children and grandchildren, 7 of them now, gathered at the house for a big meal. Thomas proposed a toast, standing at the head of the table with his glass raised. To my parents, who taught us what love looks like, who showed us that kindness and courage matter more than anything else, who built a life out of nothing but hope and determination. May we all be as lucky as you have been. Hear, hear. Everyone chorused, glasses clinking. Later, when the guests had gone home and the house was quiet, Zachariah and Fiona walked out to the porch. The night was cool and clear, the stars brilliant overhead. They sat on the swing that had been their refuge for so many years, rocking gently back and forth. 32 years, Fiona mused. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like forever. Good forever or bad forever, the best forever. She took his hand, her fingers thin now but still strong. I was thinking today about that woman in the mirror, the one who was so lonely she talked to her own reflection. She seems like someone from a dream now, someone I used to be but cannot quite remember being. You are still her in a way. Just braver, happier, loved. Because of you, you gave me everything I ever wanted, Zachariah, a friend who listens, a partner who sees me, a love that never wavers. You gave me a life. You gave me the same thing. I was running from myself when I found you, and you taught me how to stand still. How to build instead of destroy. How to be the man I always wanted to be. They sat in comfortable silence, the swing creaking softly beneath them. In the distance, they could hear the sounds of McGill settling down for the night, the town that had become their home, the place where they had built their legacy. You think we have done enough? Fiona asked. Left enough of a mark? I think we have done more than enough. We raised good children who are raising good children. We built a business that serves the community. We loved each other and were not afraid to show it. What more could anyone ask for? Nothing. You are right. We have lived a good life. And we are not done yet. We still have years ahead of us, years to watch our grandchildren grow, to see what Grace makes of herself, to enjoy our time together. Promise me something, Zachariah, anything. Promise me that when our time comes, we will go together. I do not want to live in a world without you. He squeezed her hand. I promise I will do my best. But until then, let us focus on living, not dying. Let us make every day count. Deal. They continued to rock on the swing, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. The lonely woman and the haunted man were gone, replaced by 2 people who had learned that love was the greatest adventure of all, that friendship could bloom into passion, and that sometimes the reflection in the mirror could lead you to exactly where you needed to be. In 1920, Zachariah suffered a mild stroke that left him weakened but still mentally sharp. Fiona nursed him back to health with the same determination she had brought to everything else in her life. He recovered slowly, and though he walked with a cane now and tired more easily, he remained engaged in life, playing with his grandchildren, giving advice to his children, and sitting on the porch every evening with his beloved wife. In the spring of 1925, as the desert bloomed with unusual abundance after a wet winter, Zachariah woke one morning and knew his time was close. He was 66 years old and had lived a fuller life than he ever thought possible. Fiona was beside him, as she had been every morning for 42 years, and he turned to look at her, memorizing her face one last time. "Good morning, my love," she said, sensing something in his expression. "Good morning. I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "Thank you for everything. For taking a chance on me, for building this life with me, for every day we have had together. I could not have asked for more." Tears filled her eyes. "You are not saying goodbye, you cannot. Not yet, but soon, I can feel it." He reached for her hand. "You have to promise me you will keep living, Fiona. Keep laughing, keep loving our family. Do not disappear back into that loneliness. I promise." "But Zachariah, I cannot imagine this world without you." "You will not have to imagine it for long. I will wait for you wherever we go next. And when you get there, I will be standing there ready to listen to anything you want to tell me, just like always." She crawled into bed beside him, and they held each other as the sun rose, painting their bedroom in shades of gold and pink. Their children came later that day, sensing the shift, and they gathered around the bed, telling stories and laughing and crying together. Zachariah Jameson died peacefully that evening, surrounded by the family he loved, his wife's hand in his. His last words were, "What a beautiful life we made." Fiona lived for 3 more years, years filled with the love of her children and grandchildren, years spent running the lending library she had founded and helping Alina with the school. She never forgot her promise to Zachariah, and she lived fully right up until the end. On a quiet morning in the spring of 1928, Fiona sat in front of the hall mirror one last time. She looked at her reflection, at the old woman with white hair and kind eyes, and smiled. "Hello, old friend," she said softly. "I have not needed to talk to you in so long, but today I wanted to say thank you. Thank you for being there when I was lonely, for reflecting back the woman I was so I could become the woman I am. And thank you for showing me Zachariah that day. You gave me everything." She stood slowly, her joints aching but her spirit still strong, and went out to the porch. She sat on the swing and closed her eyes, feeling the sun on her face, hearing the sounds of McGill around her. She thought about the scared, lonely woman she had been, talking to her reflection because she had no one else. She thought about the brave cowboy who had walked into her store and changed everything. She thought about their children, their grandchildren, the life they had built together from nothing but hope and determination. Fiona Jameson died peacefully on that porch swing, a smile on her face, her spirit already racing ahead to find the man who had promised to wait for her. They buried her next to Zachariah in the cemetery outside of town, under a shared headstone that reads simply, "Two souls who found each other, forever united in love." Their children and grandchildren continued the legacy they had built. The store thrived for generations. The lending library became a proper public library. Alina's school educated hundreds of children, and Samuel's horses became famous throughout Nevada. The house behind the store stood for decades, and visitors would sometimes report seeing an elderly couple sitting on the porch swing in the evening light, rocking gently and holding hands, though when anyone looked directly, no one was there. The story of Zachariah and Fiona Jameson became part of McGill's folklore, told and retold with embellishments and romance. But those who knew them best, their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, knew that the true story needed no embellishment. It was already extraordinary. A tale of 2 lonely people who found each other at exactly the right moment, who had the courage to choose love over fear, and who built a life so rich and full that its echoes continued long after they were gone. The hall mirror remained in the family, passed down through generations, and sometimes on quiet evenings, when the light was just right, people swore they could see the reflection of a woman talking to herself, and the shadow of a man watching her with love in his eyes, waiting for the moment when he would step forward and change both their lives forever.